her capacity as chair of the all-party women group in this House. And to that letter she will, of course, receive a response. That contention has not previously been made, but if it is now made, I say with absolute certainty it is not correct. I have not said that to or about the Honourable Lady. That is my response to the Honourable Lady. Yes, indeed. Yes. Point of order, Laura Pidcock.
Thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. I would like to say it's nice to be back. I would just wonder what conclusion members of the public will draw from the chamber being used in this way. The right honourable gentleman has made his point.
Keep going.
I have heard from my constituency office today that members of my constituency and residents have had to have present parcels delivered to them because they cannot afford to buy their children presents. They have not got the money for food, and the chamber being used in this way is absolutely pathetic.
Well, the Honourable Lady has made her own point in her own way, and it's on the record, and I thank her for taking part in these proceedings. And I will come to other members, preferably to people who have not already raised points of order. Point of order, Helen Whately.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think actually it is important what language is used in this chamber. And this centenary year, a large number of us on all sides of the House have made huge efforts to encourage more women to stand for Parliament, many of which have been successful. I believe women are coming forward. It is a great shame that we seem to be nearing the end of the year on such a sour note. Can I urge you, Mr. Speaker, to do more to make sure that the tone of this chamber is better next year, not just to draw a line under this, to make sure next year is better on these points?
I think, can I say to the Honourable Lady, I think that's an entirely reasonable point of order. I'm happy to do my bit, and everybody else should do their bit as well. I have the highest regard for the Honourable Lady, whose commitment on these issues is well known to me. I hope the Honourable Lady and others will take it in the right spirit if I say that throughout my 9.5 years in the chair to date, I have devoted myself to the cause of trying to open up this place. I have sought to do everything I can to promote a progressive approach in the chamber, in the calling of members, in the functions that I host in Speaker's House, in the approach to facilities on the estate, which didn't previously exist. That's all part of the record. It is manifest, it is observable, and it is incontrovertible. Can we all do better? We can. Should we? We should. Will we? I hope that we will. So I am agreeing with the Honourable Lady, and I'm sure that that will please her. Point of order, Mr. Simon Hoare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On live television this afternoon, I think everybody in the House would know of well-respected and much admired deaf musician, Dame Evelyn Glennie, world-famous percussionist. She was shown by the presenter of that television programme the clip of the Leader of the Opposition and asked what he had said. And he said, "Stupid woman." Is there any way I can put on the record that with that tone of apology from the right honourable gentleman, it would have been better if he hadn't bothered?
Well, I don't honestly think, and I say this in all courtesy to the honourable gentleman whom I've known for 3 decades, that he's really very interested in anything I have to say in response to him. What he wanted to do was to say, no, and I'm not even complaining. I'm not criticising the honourable gentleman, and I'm grateful for his good humour. The honourable gentleman wanted to make his own point, and he's made it. And I stand by what I previously said. The honourable gentleman's made an important point, but it isn't not a contradiction of what I've said about the impossibility of certainty, nor is it inconsistent with the spontaneous interpretation which I myself offered. But I repeat, it was my interpretation. I'm not a lip reader, I'm not a lip speaker, and it's not for me to cast judgment in this matter. And fair-minded people who are interested in the merits of the issue, and I'm sure that includes the honourable gentleman, will know that what I say is true. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I will come to other colleagues. Point of order, Seema Malhotra.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also agree that we have a responsibility as members of this House to be upholding the very highest standards in language about each other, but also about each other's integrity. And I do hope that we will be able to see a renewed commitment to that next year. Mr. Speaker, I also would like to say that I have been proud to sit on your committee for enhancing equality and diversity in this House from very soon after I was elected, and to put on record my thanks to you for your commitment to equality and diversity in this House in so many different manners. And my point of order, Mr. Speaker, is on a slightly different topic, however, because according to press reports of a leaked DWP document, EU exit planning, economic downturn, the government, as part of its long-term contingency planning in the event of no deal, suggested it would create a strategy with other departments handling the negative impacts, e.g. homelessness, poverty and suicide. Mr. Speaker, if this is true, these are extremely serious allegations and should be, or matters, and should be brought explicitly to this House so that we have access to government analysis as to who they expect to fall into poverty, where homelessness could rise and who they see at risk of suicide.
For her initial remarks and for her subsequent point of order, to which my response is that there may be an opportunity for those concerns to be aired during the course of the afternoon. Point of order, Sir Desmond Swade.
Mr. Speaker, can I declare an interest as someone who has a bad habit of making utterances under my breath in this chamber? My point of order to you, sir, is had you received different advice from the lip speakers, giving uncontroversial controvertible evidence as to what the Leader of the Opposition have said, what would have been the result? Because I am deeply concerned about the fact that if members are to be upbraided for what they might say under their breath, we are in the realms of thought crime. And this is the madness that is sweeping the universities. What was said was not on the record.
Well, I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman. I think I've already pointed to the impossibility of certainty in these matters. I repeat, I think most people would accept the reasonableness of my point, and I note with interest and respect the point that the Right Honourable Gentleman, who's an extremely experienced and distinguished parliamentarian, has made. Point of order, Sir Patrick McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I fully accept what you have said in the fact that you were not in the eye line of the Leader of the Opposition. Sitting where I was sitting, I was in the eye line of the Leader of the Opposition. I do have to accept what he has said at the dispatch box, because I don't think he would deliberately lie to the House. But other people will be able to draw their own conclusions from it.
Well, can I, off the top of my head, thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for what he has said and for the understated terms in which he has said it. People can form their own judgment, but I appreciate the fact that the Right Honourable Gentleman is not seeking to prolong the argument further, at any rate on the evidence of what he has just said, and that, I think, is respected. He's a very senior member of this House with long experience. And yes, indeed. Of course, I will come to the Honourable Lady. Point of order, Dr. Matthew Offord.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank you, Mr. Speaker, because you said you would go away and you would look at the evidence, you would look at the video, and you would make your mind up, and you did that. And I am very grateful. But it is for my constituents to make their own mind up when they actually look at that footage as well. And it is for them to decide if the honourable member or anyone else is indeed a misogynist or anti-Semitic, not for us.
Well, with great respect, and I heard the honourable gentleman out, and it was right to do so. He's made his own point, including a point that was not germane to these exchanges or this controversy, but it stands on the record. I have said I would look into it. I have looked into it. I've come back to the House and I've said what I've said, and the Leader of the Opposition has said what he's said. And I don't honestly think I can be expected to add to that, but I thank the honourable gentleman. A point of order. Yes, I will come to the honourable gentleman. Of course I will. Point of order, Mr. Nigel Huddleston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Further to the comments made by my honourable friend, the member for Chelmsford. Can I say to you, with greatest respect, Mr. Speaker, that there are occasions when people do leave this chamber feeling that they have been offended by yourself. And I think the fact that the honourable member felt that way, yet did not feel that there was an appropriate process in place in order to make that complaint or concern felt, probably suggests we've still got work to do in terms of raising issues and concerns in this place.
Always work to do, and progress is not a matter of an isolated act or a single initiative, but rather of a continuous process. I accept the significance of what the honourable gentleman says in that regard, which seems to me to be unexceptionable. Unexceptionable. Yes, point of order, Laura Smith.
As somebody who is still a relatively new member of this House, I wondered if you could advise me on how I explain to my constituents the level of party politics that is being played out.
Order. That observation at the beginning of that point of order has met with much criticism, but I would very gently say to members can't have it both ways. They can't on the one hand talk about respect, wanting respect for their own right to speak and their own opinion, but not accord a comparable level of respect to someone who happens to express a view that differs from their own. Point of order, Laura Smith.
Mr. Speaker, you hit on the end of my point, because the level of hypocrisy in this place is quite astounding. To pot up with the most disgraceful insults thrown at us, and nobody more so, Mr. Speaker, than the leader of the opposition, who has to put up with it day in, day out.
Well, the honourable lady has made her own point with force in her own way, and I thank her for doing so. She's perfectly in order to do so, and it's on the record. Yes, a point of order. Forgive me. A point of order, Mr. Mike Wood.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The guidance that you issued to members earlier in the week drew attention both to the need for temperate language, but also to the provisions around misogynistic language as part of the respect policy. If these rules don't apply to the Leader of the Opposition, what protection can member staff and staff of the House expect where behaviour isn't broadcast live on international television?
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for his point of order, and the simple answer to the honourable gentleman is that the rules apply to every honourable and right honourable member of this House. That's the factual answer. I can do no other than provide the factual answer, but I thank him for what he said. Yes, I will take remaining points of order. I do ask the House to consider the other business to which we need to proceed. But point of order, Lloyd Russell Moyle.
Thank you, Speaker. On a different note, and I hope on a note that is how point of orders should be used, I would like to seek... I would like to seek your advice.
Well, this is not a moment for levity, but I do want to hear what the honourable gentleman has to say. I do want to hear what the honourable gentleman has to say. Point of order, Mr. Lloyd Russell Moyle.
I would like to seek your advice how I could get clarification on the answer that I received from the Foreign Secretary in the Yemen statement. I made a statement. I said that the head of the civil servant in the arms control unit had advised against sales, and the ministers had overturned. He declared that that was not true. The Foreign Secretary and the Trade Secretary both refused to attend the Cake Committee hearing on this last year and have said that they will not attend this year. How can we get them to come to the committee to answer these questions, Mr. Speaker?
You can request, I say to the honourable gentleman that he can request attendance, and insofar as he inquires about other recourse open to him, my advice to the honourable gentleman, who is a resourceful individual, is that he should make the short journey from the chamber to the table office to table questions on this matter. Now, it may be that the honourable gentleman will feel inclined to table more than one question. He may table several. He may do so on a repeated basis. There is no prohibition on repetition in the House of Commons. Yes, a point of order, Kemi Badenoch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Further to your remarks earlier about impugning another member's honour and integrity, I distinctly heard during Prime Minister's questions the Leader of the Opposition refer to her actions as criminal. I've also checked on Hansard, and that is on the record. Is that in order?
It is perfectly in order to offer that expression of opinion, and I say that, yes, I say that on advice from the clerk. I didn't witness that exchange. I'm not asking the Minister of State. I'm not asking the Minister of State what she thinks he did say. I am responding to the Honourable Lady's point of order. People are entitled to offer their own views within the rules of order, and to the best of my knowledge, nothing disorderly was said. I'm happy to look at the record and consult further, but the advice that I have received is that nothing disorderly was said. And a point of order, Mr. Ben Bradshaw, of course.
Mr. Speaker, I suspect most of us are in the chamber to hear a very important application for an emergency debate on the single most important issue that's faced our country in peacetime. And the public looking in will find this spectacle completely ludicrous. So can we please move on to the important business of the House?
I'm grateful to the right honourable gentleman for what he said. I hope he'll understand me if I say that it is not possible in these matters to please everyone. I'm trying to do the right thing by listening to, taking account of, and offering a response to points of order, but I am conscious, and the House will be conscious, that we have important business to which to proceed, and I do intend that we shall do so. And I would very politely suggest that if people have already raised points of order, they should not treat points of order as an ongoing debate. If somebody raises a point of order and I respond to it, I think it is reasonable to proceed to the next person and then to a conclusion of those points of order. Point of order, Dr. Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Trust in politics is very important. We have all seen, or the vast majority of us have now seen this video. Members of this House, on both sides, have commented that they thought the words used were stupid woman. Members of the public have commented on Twitter and other places that they thought the words were stupid woman. Mr. Speaker, if I understand you correctly, your own interpretation of that video was that the words used were stupid woman, and that those of your lip speaker and the member for North Dorset's lip reader have all said the same. I take the right honourable gentleman at his word, as I will do so. I'm sure that, like the member for Derbyshire Dale said, that he would not lie in this chamber. However, I am very concerned that incongruity between the different statements will affect trust in politics, and I want to know how he could use his good office to ensure that trust in politics is not affected adversely by the incongruity between what has been said by the right honourable gentleman and the overwhelming evidence to the contrary.
And the answer is by behaving well on a regular basis and by attending to our responsibilities in this House. That, encapsulated in a sentence, is my response to the Honourable Lady's point of order, and I think it's fair and reasonable. Point of order, Mr Alistair Carmack.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The right honourable member for New Forest West is right in saying that whatever the Leader of the Opposition said was not said on the record. The Leader of the Opposition, however, has now put it on the record by coming to the dispatch box and making his statement. Anyone, and I mean anyone not just in this chamber, who has complaint to make about that has recourse to the proper procedures involving the Standards Commissioner. Surely at this time of all, Mr Speaker, it is important that we use the proper procedures rather than proceeding to trial by points of order in the chamber.
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman that I agree that we do not have, or we should not have, trial by points of order. That is not consistent with any due process. I hope the right honourable gentleman will forgive me if I say to him that, as far as I understand it, conduct in the chamber does not fall within the purview of the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner. So I don't think that an allegation of misconduct on that front in this situation could be adjudicated by the Parliamentary Standards Commission. I don't think that that is correct. But what I would say is that there are opportunities for members to continue this argument and debate if they so wish. But I genuinely ask the House, how does it avail our deliberations on public policy to proceed indefinitely with points of order on the same subject? Manifestly, it does not. I will take two more and then the members, and then I really do think we should draw the matter to a close. Point of order, Paul Scully.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to bring this to a close and asking you, in order to give people in this place and members of the public the ability to make their own mind up, I wonder if, Mr. Speaker, you might publish the advice that you received.
I'm advised no, and I stick to the advice no. I have to say to the honourable gentleman that I consulted. There was no written advice from the lip speakers. This was done at very short notice, and I was given a view by them. And it was not without qualification. I won't go into the detail of it. I gave the essence of it, but it was not without qualification or caveat. But there is no written advice from the lip speakers. So I hope I haven't misunderstood the honourable gentleman, and I don't think there's merit in persisting with this exchange. But that's my response to the honourable gentleman. Of course, point of order, James Heappey.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. It's a change of subject to return to the issue raised by the right honourable gentleman for Exeter. Mr. Speaker, there's been a series of SO24 debates recently. On Monday, over 50 members rose on the benches opposite, and barely a dozen or so spoke. The previous week, the benches opposite were absolutely full at the point of application, and barely 20 members opposite thereafter spoke. In your reviewing of Hansard, Mr. Speaker, have you noticed any inconsistency between the urgency shown in applying for SO24 debates and participation thereafter? And in your review of the content of the speeches within those debates, have you noticed any difference between the content of those speeches and those in our more routine discourse on Brexit? Finally, Mr. Speaker, as members opposite may shortly rise to support such a debate tomorrow, do you have any expectation on how many of them will then attend to speak in it?
So the last point is no, and my response to the honourable gentleman, and I thank him for his multifaceted point of order, is as follows. There is absolutely no inconsistency within the procedures of this House whatsoever between members rising to support the granting of a debate on the one hand and not choosing to participate in it on the other. There is no incongruity, there is no incompatibility, there is no inconsistency, there is no contradiction. I hope the honourable gentleman, who is a most courteous and assiduous member of this House, would accept that I 16 days ago. Mr Barry Sherman.
Mr Speaker, I was going to start my remarks by saying I've been in the House longer than you, and that is true. And I'm also well known to be a bit of a tantrum. I often turn to the person next door to me and say quite rude things, not dreadful, rude things about something I disagree with. But this is a serious point of order. I can't believe that this House is going to get to the state where something mentioned under the breath or slightly, what a silly sod, or something like that. And I say that very often quite loudly. Mr Speaker, we cannot have a system here where we start lip-reading something that someone said to the next-door neighbour when passions are high in this House. It's supposed to be a place where we have high passions, but it's also a place where we treat people like adults. And today, we've been rather like badly behaved children. We're in a crucial time in the history of our country, the most delicate and worrying time in my time in the House, and we've spent all these hours on this mention. I believe the Leader of the Opposition said what he said. Let's draw a line under it and get on and act like grown-ups.
Well, can I just say, I thank the honourable gentleman for what he said, and all I would like to do is to plant in the minds of honourable and right honourable members, before we proceed, one simple fact, and that is that a number of very, very senior members with long experience of this House and coming from both sides of it have in recent months made a very similar point. Today the honourable gentleman has made that point, and I think she won't take exception or cavil if I say that the Right Honourable Lady, the member for Derby South, made a similar point at an earlier stage in our proceedings. It is a point that has previously been made by the father of the House. They do have long experience. They do know what they're talking about. And it might be a good idea to have a degree of calm and a readiness to heed their wise advice. Order. I now call Keir Starmer to make an application for leave. The honourable gentleman is ahead of himself. I now call Keir Starmer to make an application for leave to propose a debate on a specific and important matter that should have urgent consideration under the terms of Standing Order number 24. The right honourable gentleman has up to 3 minutes in which to make such an application. Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, for allowing time to hear this emergency application for a debate on a specific and important matter, namely that this House has considered the matter of the Cabinet's decision to accelerate preparations for a no-deal outcome to Brexit, following the Prime Minister's failure to allow this House promptly to express its view on the Government's deal in light of the significant public expenditure involved. Mr Speaker, yesterday the Government announced an additional £2 billion of spending to prepare for leaving the European Union without a withdrawal agreement. They've done so after denying the House the opportunity to express its view on the Government's deal and its view on leaving the European Union without a deal by deferring the meaningful vote originally scheduled for Tuesday, the 11th of December. If that vote had been held, I have no doubt the Government's deal would have been roundly rejected, as would any proposal that we leave with no deal. Mr Speaker, no government has the right to risk the well-being of the United Kingdom because of its own failed negotiations, and it is vital that the government is held to account for its spending of public money, especially when the sums involved are so large and the stakes are so high. I therefore ask for this emergency debate to be held. Thank you.
The right honourable gentleman asks leave to propose a debate on a specific and important matter that should have urgent consideration under the terms of Standing Order number 24, namely, I don't think the right honourable and learned gentleman quoted this, but it is right for me to quote it, namely, the matter of the Cabinet's decision to accelerate preparations for a no-deal outcome to Brexit, following the Prime Minister's failure to allow this House promptly to express its view on the Government's deal in the light of the significant public expenditure involved. I have listened carefully to the application from the right honourable member. I am satisfied that the matter raised is proper to be discussed under Standing Order number 24. Has the right honourable and learned gentleman the leave of the House?
No, no, no.
The objection has been raised by the honourable gentleman, the member for Wellingborough, which is in conformity with our procedures. In those circumstances, if there is an objection, it is necessary for at least 40 members to rise in their places in the House in order to facilitate such a debate. It is, I think, clear that somewhat in excess of 40 members are standing in the House. I thank the honourable gentleman who's faithfully complied with our procedures, but the fact is that the House, under our rules, has decided that the debate is sought, and I thank members for doing so. The debate will take place immediately, and it would ordinarily do so for up to 3 hours, but of course, as the right honourable and learned gentleman will know, the debate has to conclude by the moment of interruption, so it will be a little less than 3 hours, but it is right that the right honourable and learned gentleman should now open the debate.
10-minute rule bill.
I think we have the... when we've heard the 10-minute rule motion, so it will be somewhat less. Who's the 10-minute rule motion? 10-minute rule motion. A second go of the day on this important matter and a fuller opportunity for the honourable lady. 10-minute rule motion, Maria Caulfield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very grateful to be given 10 minutes to present my bill. I beg to...
Order. I appreciate that there is a... Order. Mr. Pound. Mr. Pound. Calm yourself, man. I'm sure you've got some witticism to share with a colleague, which will be of great interest to the said member, but it could usefully be done outside the curtilage of the chamber. I think the honourable lady deserves the courtesy of the attention of the House for her 10-minute rule motion. So I would ask members who want to discuss other matters to do so elsewhere. We've just been talking about the need for respect. Let us show respect for the honourable lady as she introduces her 10-minute rule motion. Maria Caulfield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to require the provision of defibrillators in educational establishments and in leisure, sports and certain other public facilities, and to make provision for funding the acquisition, installation, use and maintenance of defibrillators and for connected purposes. This is my second attempt, Mr. Speaker, to bring in this bill, as last year it fell when the general election was called. But it's imperative that we push for these life-saving devices to be installed and be mandatory in our public buildings. As I said in Prime Minister's questions, 12 young people each and every week die as a result of a sudden cardiac arrest. And if they are in a shockable rhythm, around 80% of them could be saved by the use of a defibrillator. So the purpose of this bill is to increase the rates of survival from cardiac arrest, as currently our record of survival in the UK is dismal. According to the British Heart Foundation, almost 30,000 cardiac arrests a year happen outside of hospitals, and less than 10% of those people currently survive. In fact, in some parts of England, survival rates are as low as 2%. And behind each of those statistics are people, families and communities. A cardiac arrest can happen for many reasons, from trauma right through to congenital heart defects. But if a person is in a shockable rhythm, using a defibrillator can increase their survival by as much as 80%. But for defibs to be successful, minutes count, and quick access to a defibrillator is essential. If too much time elapses, a shockable rhythm turns to a non-shockable rhythm, and the chances of survival decrease rapidly. If a person's heart is not restarted within 4 minutes, their chances of living are reduced by almost 80%. Even the speediest paramedic in the country would struggle to get to someone in 4 minutes. That is why having easy, accessible defibrillators is so crucial. Across the UK, we have laws mandating the availability of other life-saving equipment, such as seat belts, fire extinguishers and smoke alarms, but not a single piece of legislation requiring defibrillators that could restart the heart of 12 young people each week. Now, my passion for this was started by the former young mayor of Seaford in my constituency, Jessica Batchelor. At the age of 15, she witnessed firsthand a close family friend die of a sudden cardiac arrest, and no defibrillator was available. As the young mayor of the town, she raised thousands of pounds to ensure there are defibrillators in the town of Seaford, and she lobbied me as our MP to do something about a change in the law. Councillor Mel Phillips in my other town of Holgate is currently raising thousands of pounds. The town is divided by a level crossing and only one side of the town has a defibrillator. Now, the aim of this bill is not to undermine the excellent work of existing charities such as the British Heart Foundation or the St John's Ambulance, but to support them. And I'm pleased to say that since I presented this bill last year, progress has been made in establishing a register, a national register of defibrillators. The British Heart Foundation is launching the National Defibrillator Network from next spring and is urging everyone to register their defibrillator on their website, so that if any of us have to dial 999 when someone's in a cardiac arrest, that phone handler can tell you exactly where your nearest defibrillator is. So it's essential to ensure there is adequate defibrillator coverage across the country and that we know these defibrillators are maintained and replaced when necessary. So the aim now of this bill that I present today is to ensure that schools, sports facilities and public buildings all have defibrillators as standard in every town and village in the country, and that these can be accessed 24 hours a day. Now, I know, and the Prime Minister made this point at Prime Minister's questions, that not every village has a school or a leisure centre, but they do all need a designated defibrillator. And it's important that people know where these pieces of equipment are. Currently, there's a postcode lottery, because even in schools, despite the Department for Education's efforts, we only know of 1,389 defibrillators in schools in England. In Northern Ireland, we know of one, and in Scotland, we don't know of any. But that's not to say they do not exist. But without this register, we are none the wiser of where these life-saving equipment are. The bill also aims to increase the use of defibrillators, because it's important not just to have these defibrillators, but to make sure they are used when they are needed. I have talked to residents in my villages who tell me they would be afraid to use a defibrillator and think they need training to do so, although nothing could be further from the truth. All a person has to do is to stick the 2 pads on someone's chest, turn the machine on, and that machine will tell you exactly what to do without training. But people are afraid to use them. The bill's aim is not to state that only trained people should use defibrillators, but to mandate training for local communities with every installation so that people feel confident to use them. I wonder how many members of Parliament here today know how many defibrillators are on the estate in Parliament. There are 28 in total. They're in the House of Lords, House of Commons, Normanshire North, Portcullis House, and 2 in the Elizabeth Tower. But, Mr Speaker, do you know where our nearest defibrillator is to us right now? According to the intranet, it's in members' lobby. But this morning, it took me, a doorkeeper and a member of security 4 minutes to find that defibrillator. It's in a cupboard with no sign, and no one knows that it's there. Those 4 minutes could cost someone's life. And can I just share the difference that a defibrillator can make? This morning I heard from Stuart Freeman, a constituent of the Honourable Member for Tonbridge and Malling, whose daughter, just aged 18, suffered a cardiac arrest just in March. She was given CPR and a defibrillator was available, and it saved her life. Serena has met with the Honourable Member for Tonbridge and Malling to plead the case for better training and more access to defibrillators, and she is a great example of the difference defibrillators can make. I therefore move that this bill be introduced so that we can mandate that defibs are installed across the whole of the UK in publicly accessible places, and that training is available so that people know what to do in the event of a cardiac arrest and are not afraid to use them if they need to. It's crucial to support the work of our many charities such as the British Heart Foundation and the St John's Ambulance to ensure we save as many lives as possible. This year, Mr Speaker, this week, 12 young people will have died of a cardiac arrest. 28,000 will have died this year. Those lives could have been saved by this bill, and I urge members to support it.
Yeah. Order. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Jim Shannon, Stephen Twigg, Edward Vasey, Chris Green, Dr Philippa Whitford, Peter Aldous and Dr Lisa Cameron and myself.
Yeah.
SO24 debate.
Maria Caulfield.
Defibrillators Availability Bill.
Second reading what day?
25th of January 2019.
25th of January 2019. Thank you. Order. Before we proceed to the Standing Order number 24 debate, I have now to announce the result of today's deferred divisions. In respect of the question relating to markets in financial instruments, the ayes were 307, the noes were 215, so the ayes have it, the ayes have it. In respect of the question relating to accounts and reports, the ayes were 305, the noes were 216, so the ayes have it, the ayes have it. To open the Standing Order number 24 debate, I call the Shadow Secretary of State for Brexit, Keir Starmer.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I beg to move the motion that this House has considered the matter of the Cabinet's decision to accelerate preparations for a no-deal outcome to Brexit, following the Prime Minister's failure to allow this House promptly to express its views on the Government's deal in light of the significant public expenditure involved. Mr Speaker, the background to this debate is well known. This House was due to vote on the Government's deal on the 11th of December. The day before that vote, the Prime Minister pulled the vote, recognising, and I use her words, that she was going to lose the vote by a significant margin, and saying that she wanted more time to secure further assurances on the backstop. Mr Speaker, I was in the House when the Prime Minister made her statement on the 10th of December, and the majority, in my view, was clearly against deferring the vote. No doubt for that reason, the Prime Minister did not have the courage to put her decision to defer the meaningful vote to a vote, preferring instead for the Government not to move its own business. Mr Speaker, the problem with the Prime Minister's approach is obvious, and that's, I think, why the majority were against deferring the vote. Firstly, the Prime Minister is highly unlikely to get meaningful changes to the withdrawal agreement. Secondly, unless meaningful changes to the withdrawal agreement are made, the majority in this House are not likely to support the Prime Minister's deal whenever it gets put. That's a point bluntly accepted by the International Trade Secretary, who said recently, and I quote, "It's very difficult to support the deal if we don't get the changes to the backstop. I don't think it will get through." And the first problem about getting changes to meaningful changes to the withdrawal agreement were laid bare last week. After informal talks on Monday and Tuesday of last week between the Prime Minister and other leaders, and then the EU summit on Thursday and Friday, the EU made its position clear. The President of the Commission said, quote, "There is no room whatsoever for renegotiation." The Commission spokesperson said, again in quotes, "The European Council's given the clarifications that were possible at this stage. No further meetings with the EU." And the EU Council also made clear that the withdrawal agreement, again quotes, "is not open for renegotiations." And that's why there have been such strong calls this week for the vote to be put back to this House this week.
On that point,
Yes, I'll give way.
I thank my honourable and learned friend for giving way. And there are many of us, right honourable and honourable members in this House, who are becoming increasingly suspicious that the reason why this Brexit can is being kicked further and further. Does my learned friend agree that that is a disastrous and reckless policy which is not in our national interest?
is happening to our country. Does he agree with me that we should be all put on standby by this government so at the first available minute we can have a vote on this important matter?
Well, I certainly agree that we need a vote as soon as possible, and I really do think it should have been on the 11th of December, and if not then, it should have been this week, because, and to elaborate on the point just made, the only purpose now in deferring the vote until the 14th of January is to run the clock down and to attempt to present the vote as a binary choice between the Prime Minister's deal or no deal. I will give way.
My honourable friend for giving way. And